Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
So many of you over the last 3 months have been asking me questions through email about not just becoming a stronger grounded man, but also about how I built my online freedom business. You see, I used to be broke, sleeping on my brother's couch with only $15 to my name, to now having a top-ranked men's podcast on iTunes. I'm a 3-time Amazon bestselling author. I sell out events where men come from around the world to attend my powerful trainings, and I'm working with amazing clients one-on-one. I share exactly what I would do if I was going to start over in this free training on becoming an influencer at kfminfluence.com. Again, that's kfminfluence.com. This will get you in the game, save you thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of trying to figure all of this out on your own. This is the stuff people charge for, but I'm giving it to you for free at kfminfluence.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Dr. Anna Akbari, a sociologist who's done extensive research on image and power, also a TEDx talk on digital happiness, and she's also the author of Start Up Your Life, How to Hustle and Hack Your Way to Happiness. Dr. Akbari, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and Anna, we start off every show with a success quote or some sort of saying that you've lived by. So what do you got, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I open my book with a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, who is one of my personal heroes. And she says, happiness is not a goal, it's a byproduct. And we are in a culture that's really obsessed with happiness and all the different ways that we can find it. And so I think this quote is a reality check about, how we seek and invite happiness into our lives.
How do you think most people are viewing happiness today? And how do you see it?
Yeah, I think that they see it as, oh, I need to do this thing. Like I need to meditate, or I need to just be positive, or, things they can check off the list, and that's going to make them happy. And what I love about this is that it's not the goal in and of itself. It's a byproduct of doing things that help you. And the way I interpret it is, by extension, that the byproduct means that it's by doing things where we flourish, where we're truly engaged, where we find a flow state. All of these things then lead to feelings of happiness. It's not just if I do this, boom, happiness. Like it's sustained. That's all I have to do. I don't have to think about it anymore. It's an ongoing quest. It's not something you achieve and move on from.
And so you talked about flow. As you started saying, you're doing things where you're engaged, and immediately I thought of flow. Can you talk a little bit more about what flow is for the audience, for those that don't know what it is, and how can we engage and get more flow in our lives?
Yeah, so it's a phrase that was originally coined by the positive psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and it is essentially any activity in which we have some kind of a challenge, but the challenge is achievable, and it is something that keeps our mind fully engaged throughout the course of it. So this could be when you're doing something creative, like playing music, or if you're visually artistic, it could be playing sports, could be going for a run. Gamers experience flow a lot because your mind is completely immersed in that activity. And so finding flow in our lives in all the various forms could be even the work that you do. I mean, it's really important to the work that we do. It produces better results, and you are happier both while you're engaged in the activity as well as your long-term sort of sustainable well-being and happiness goes up the more you're able to go into regular flow states.
Okay, so we understand now what flow is, and so how does this how does this differ from what most people are doing to achieve happiness?
Right. So when you are approaching happiness more as a checklist, it is less about, first of all, being challenged. I think that's one of the misgivings of happiness, is that it's this easy thing that we can just sort of sign up for, and because we want it, it happens, and that's it. It's something that involves difficulty and involves work. And it's also something that you have to re-up all the time to continue in that state of flow. It's not something that's it's one and done.
And so are you saying that we should put aside the meditation, the journaling, positive affirmations, these things where these kind of are typical things that would be on a checklist to happiness, and instead spend more time pursuing what gives us flow?
Well, it's not so much that I'm saying get rid of those things, but I think the problem is that a lot of the advice that's out there, a lot of the self-help is recommending any single one of those things, and that alone is going to turn your life around. And I think that that's really dangerous. And I would be very surprised if anyone says that, just sitting around and thinking positively or just meditating delivers the full scale results that you're looking for in terms of transforming your life. I'm not saying that those things aren't worthy activities. I think meditation is fantastic. It's something that I do myself. It's something that I recommend that my clients do. It's not an either or. It's just that a lot of self-help falls short in that particular way.
Okay. And so how often should one be engaging in flow to see results in their happiness?
I mean, ideally, it's something you do on a daily basis, setting your workday up so that you can go into flow states, allowing yourself to find flow in your conversations and your interactions with people. I mean, that's something that we have halted significantly. We're so constantly mediated and pinged all the time that there's something very different that happens when you're fully present with someone. And that's something that a lot of people don't give themselves permission to do. And it diminishes the value and how satisfactory the relationship is, both for yourself and for the other person as well. So that's another place that we can really find flow in an everyday way.
I think you brought up a huge point where we spend a lot of our lives in the digital social world through social media, and we feel like we're connected to hundreds, maybe thousands of people, yet in reality we are alone on a piece of little device, and we're swiping on a piece of glass, and that's the reality of what we're doing. What are your thoughts on how today's world of social media and how it's playing a role in our digital social life?
Yeah, I mean, people are, and we hear this somewhat often, people are more quote unquote connected than ever, and yet lonelier than ever. Our relationships are more superficial. We don't give them the time and attention that we previously did. We equate a like or, a follow with friendship or meaningful interaction. And while those things are terrific at doing some maintenance when you can't be face to face, they're not a full substitute for it. And of course, that bleeds into the dating world as well. In a swiping culture, there is a sort of disposable mentality. And we have that sense in many areas of our social life. Our relationships are the single most important indicator of long-term health and happiness. Not having close personal relationships is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or being obese. Our relationships really matter. And just having a lot of Instagram followers is not the same as having close personal ties and people that you support and that support you. And one of the things I talk about in my book is building what I call life VCs. Startups have venture capitalists that invest in them and that invest in the founders. And, I always used to say I wanted to have some kind of a life sponsor to support my creative pursuits. And while it doesn't exist in that exact form, we do have the opportunity to nurture these sort of life VCs. And I'm not talking about networking as usual. I'm not talking about a drive-by business card exchange or a LinkedIn request. I'm talking about creating relationships of varying degrees of closeness at different points in our lives that we reciprocally invest in over time, whether it's an introduction, a periodic coffee, a phone check-in, support for an issue that we have expertise in. It could be any number of things. And this person might not be your best friend. They might not be your official mentor or life coach, but sometimes these looser relationships that we still give our time and attention to can actually pay off really big in the long run. But we frequently don't want to put our time and energy into, a relationship where the immediate payoff isn't obvious. So I really recommend investing in life VCs as you go and not limiting yourself to only a couple of close friends and then a sea of online followers.
Yeah, I think what you just said was very astounding. The single biggest indicator of long-term health and happiness is social connection. And you said lacking in social ties is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day to your health. So I could be extremely healthy. I'd be going to the gym. I could have a personal trainer. I could be doing whatever paleo. I could be whatever the great diet is.
Yeah.
I could be on that diet. I could be, journaling. I could be meditating. I could be really good. But deep down inside, if I come home and I just open up Netflix and I'm just, not really engaging with other people, Friday, Saturday night, I'm not out and socializing and connecting with others, that I would potentially be unhealthy? Or is there, would I die?
Yes.
Would I die sooner? Would I?
Yes.
I would have a lower life expectancy?
Yes, significantly so. And when researchers look at communities of people who live the longest, a rich, active social life and a lot of communal support is one of the predominant factors in their lives consistently. And when they look at people that seem to die young, communities that do, that's often, feeling alienated is a big factor in that. And as you said, you can exercise and eat right and do everything, but if you don't feel you have those connections, it will erode your well-being.
Wow. And I think as anyone who is on a journey where they are trying to improve themselves or build a business, sometimes it can feel like you're alone because maybe others around you aren't actively trying to grow or pursue this path of entrepreneurship or whatever that path may be, whatever journey that person's on. Sometimes they can feel alone. And so I think your book has an interesting approach because you say the startup of your life versus obviously what a startup is. And it's about, really using the same methodologies in startups and applying them into your life. I think we often spend so much of our life trying to improve in our professional lives or increase our bank account or our net worth at the expense of our life.
Well, yeah. And I think, we can no longer compartmentalize. Our social and our personal lives are commingled with our professional lives now more than ever. Those spheres have intersected. And certainly it's still a worthy pursuit of keeping certain things private. But what this does is it opens up an opportunity for us to tap into these resources that we have. There's no reason that someone in your social circle can't be the person that makes the introduction that makes all the difference in your professional life. And there's no reason that some of your professional network can't lead to a really rich and fulfilling personal life that you're seeking, whether it's an activity or meeting your mate or, just reprogramming the way you think about things. So to try and compartmentalize them, first of all, it's futile. It's really not something that is achievable at this point. And two, it cuts out the opportunity for, as I say, these life VCs that enrich us in ways that are very unanticipated most of the time.
Yeah. In your book, you talk about the importance of finding happiness along the journey. So like in the now, like today, rather than at some distant point that that's really uncertain that if we'll ever achieve that or not.
Yep.
And if we don't, then it's a complete crisis. And then if we do, we might be surprised to find out we're still unhappy.
Yeah, I think that we operate for milestones more often than not. And life is really 99% of it is what happens in between the milestones. And just like the studies and the statistics that I'm sure many people have heard about, things like winning the lottery or, experiencing a terrible accident, those things have a very dramatic effect on our happiness and well-being. But ultimately, we reset unless we actively process it and use it to get to a happier place more consistently. So, the milestones, you wouldn't have to dig hard in your memory to think of a time when you or someone close to you has been dedicating their life to a particular milestone, be it getting married, finishing grad school, making partner, whatever it is, only to achieve that and then feel a real malaise because it didn't deliver the happiness they'd been banking on. And sometimes part of why that disappoints us is that we plan rather than experiment. Sometimes we get it in our minds that we should do something or should achieve something, and we don't check in with ourselves along the way to see, hey, how's that going? Like, is this still relevant? Is this still in demand? Is this still a fit for me? Or is it going to make me miserable? And, oftentimes people then wake up and they're in deep, whether it's in a relationship or in a career path or whatever, and they say, wow, I'm miserable, but I feel I'm too far in to shift focus.
Yeah, that's a big one, yeah.
And that they settle for that feeling of being miserable.
Yeah, I've known many people who were in med school or who were in law school, and they were so far in and so far in debt that they just felt that they had to complete because they're so invested into it. Their family's been supporting them all this time, and they would feel like a failure if they walked away. And so they end up going down this path knowing every day that it's not for them. What would you suggest to someone who's in something like that? Maybe even a relationship. They've been married for so long, or they feel like they just have to do it, or there's kids, or I mean, that's a big question I asked you. But yeah, let's say someone is in something so deep and they know that it's not the right place for them. What would you tell them right now?
Well, one of the things I say is that it's never too early or too late to pivot your life toward what makes you happy, what fulfills you. But most people, I ask in the presentations that I give, what is it you're seeking, and are you allowing it to find you? And a lot of people don't know what it is they're seeking. They know it on a superficial level, but they're not really sure what makes them happy. And so one of the things that I suggest is creating your personal mantra, the thing that gets to your core, that is what motivates you, what everything you do comes back to. And let that be the sort of guiding principle and the test that you give the major decisions and the situations in your life that you're trying to maybe pivot away from or build on. And, embracing failure, saying, I made some choices. It's not delivering the results I want. So make like a startup and pivot in another direction and use what you've learned as a result of this process that didn't work for you to move towards something that will make you happier. And, people are statistically more likely to stay in a relationship or a job that they hate rather than moving on to something else that they know will make them happy, in part because they fear the unknown. And so fear is one of the things that you have to start to tackle. So I suggest to people to consistently put themselves in situations that they fear on some level, even if it's speaking up in front of a group or asking someone out. Those small things push you out of your comfort zone, and they increase your appetite for risk, good risk. And so when it comes time to make these big decisions and to pivot as you may need to, it doesn't seem so catastrophic. You feel that you are mentally equipped to handle it. But, learning to surf fear and to embrace and make something of failure is a big one.
In the moment of failure, let's say I did something and I failed, what do you say to yourself versus what do most people say to themselves in that moment of failure?
Well, Well, I mean, I think, and some people might call this denial, but I think you can reframe failure and say, okay, this isn't necessarily failure, but it's success, and that I know what didn't work. I've learned the way that I shouldn't be moving forward. And so if you frame it as failure, you spend all this mental energy beating yourself up and being embarrassed and making apologies for it, rather than doing what, some of our greatest inventors, some of our greatest innovators like Thomas Edison or Henry Ford, these guys were failures a lot of the time, over and over again.
I haven't heard these guys were failures. I haven't heard it put
they
like
were.
that, but in reality, I think even modern entrepreneurs. I mean, Elon Musk, his spaceship blew up and he lost hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, that's a massive failure when you're literally months away from going bankrupt. I mean, that's a modern day massive failure. I think guys today are constantly failing, and what I'm getting is that you're saying I'm not a failure, you're saying I learned. And so it's either you succeed or you learn, and then you just learn how to succeed sooner if you continue failing.
Right. And you iterate, you actively, mindfully reflect on the failures. You don't become a winner just by duping yourself and saying that failure was a win. It was a learning experience.
Right.
Actually, you have to do the work. Right. You have to do the work. You need to. So for whatever that looks like for you, for a lot of people, that might mean processing it through writing. It might mean having a series of conversations with some individuals that help you to poke holes in assumptions maybe that you were making and to unlearn some things. We all process and learn differently, but whatever it is that works best for you, you have to actively do that and then capitalize on that moment where you're in transition, where you're a bit exhausted from trying and failing. That moment of transition is when we're most ripe for change. It's when we're most not just vulnerable, but we're open to new things. We're open to seeing things differently. Many of the clients that I work with, both on a personal one-on-one level as well as larger corporations, are at a point of transition for many different reasons. But they are the best to work with because there's a sense of, okay, I need this. There's also a sense of humility. And there's that openness. I give a lecture on relationships, and I have a theory that you should always date like you're on vacation. Because
what do you mean? Break that down.
when you're on vacation, you are all in because there's a certain sort of time constraint, but you also have tempered expectations. So you're open and you're excited for whatever may come your way, but you know that it might not deliver the results that you want, and you're sort of okay with that. But that doesn't mean that you aren't allowing yourself to fully experience the person or the experience. And it's that combination of the two, that sort of all in, but with eyes wide open, that I think we can benefit from in our professional lives as well.
I've never heard that, and I'm really starting to feel that. So like if you've ever had you're talking about like a romantic kind of thing on a vacation, that feeling where it's really exciting, you're all in, there's a time constraint, and then and then you kind of know that it's gonna end, but you still want to experience or even if you go to like Disneyland, I mean, it's gonna end, and so you're kind of there, you're more present, you're more alive in that moment, and then it ends, and you make the best of what's
and
right
ironically, it can be what delivers the relationship that you're looking for. Honestly, I would argue you have just as much of a chance of meeting someone that you can have a long-term partnership with on vacation as you can in that very sort of controlled dating environment that maybe you conduct yourself with in your everyday life at home.
Yes.
It might logistically pose some issues, but as you say, you tend to be more present in that moment, and that changes everything with your relationship.
Absolutely. You have you're talking about failure and we're talking about how we can change and reframe how it affects us. Inside of your book, you talk about bootstrapping your life, which I think is really interesting because we obviously know what bootstrapping means in business, where it's kind of this survival mentality and you're kind of like, I picture like, kind of like Steve Jobs in his garage, like bootstrapping the business, just all in, trying to make it work, just using it's like resourceful is the way I think of bootstrapping. Yes. So how does that, when you talk about bootstrapping your life, how does that apply over? What are you meaning here?
Yeah, it's a scrappiness mentality. One of the things I say in the book is that hustle trumps pedigree. And I think that's important to remember. Resources are great and connections are wonderful. But at the end of the day, it's that person that is able to make something of nothing, that's able to reimagine how we do something or how we use something. It's that hustle that ultimately delivers the inventions and the innovations that we revere the most in society. It wasn't just a matter of who had the most money. Certainly, money tends to follow those people, or, once they have money, they can do great things with it. But ultimately, if it were just about money, there would be a lot of really wealthy trust fund kids who would just be crushing it all over Silicon Valley. But instead, we see, we see a lot of immigrant founders.
Yeah.
That are some of the most noteworthy founders in Silicon Valley. So, I think it's important, no matter where you started from, whether it's poverty or a trust fund, to know that, what you do with your resources, the way you operate, the way you do business matters more than the initial resources you started out with.
Yeah. Right now, if you look at the Forbes, top wealthiest people, most of these guys are self-made. And that's and that's really never been before in history, that it just kind of, it wasn't really possible hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, to just go from being lower class to you are one of the richest people in the world in a 20-year, sometimes I guess in Spiegel's case or Zuckerberg's case, or within 5 years. It's just really, I think about that, that's really not. We live in a really interesting time, and I think applying that same mentality over to our own lives shows, well, what could we create in our own lives? What kind of transformation in our social lives and our happiness could we create in such a short amount of time?
Well, and I think that too often we become very complacent in the areas of our lives that we should be hustling the most. I mean, I'll go back to relationships. Yeah. Many people, men included, and more men than women think that there's one soulmate for every person. The statistic is somewhere around like 75% of men or something think that, which is a pretty astonishing number, I think. And what happens when that is your mentality is you feel either A, that you don't have to do the work to find them because if it's fate, it's going to happen and they're just going to come knocking at your door. And B, that once you do, quote unquote, find them, that you don't have to do the work to keep them around. And that's not how relationships work. And that's not how good fortune works. I talk in the book about luck and how I hate the term luck. And the psychologist Richard Wiseman did this research on luck and how we create our own luck by putting ourselves out there and capitalizing on things and following our intuition. And the same is true for our relationships. And then if you think of your work path, go back to the law school example that you mentioned. We think, all right, well, I've gone to the right schools, I've gotten the degrees, I'm working at this place, so I should be happy and I should be successful. And then something like 2008 happens and the market crashes and people who've done everything right lose their jobs. And is that fair? Again, hustle is going to win out in those instances, and you can do everything right, and that still isn't going to make you happy necessarily. So, rethinking the role of bootstrapping and hustling in both our personal and professional lives, whether or not you're an entrepreneur, is something I think we all can benefit from.
And I think the key here is that it's not something we do for a period of our life, but it's something that is done ongoingly.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting because one of the demographics that the book seems to be resonating with is the retirement set, people who are either inching toward retirement or have recently landed there. Because, we have a lot of baby boomers, and they're retiring when they're still really vital. And, retirement is really being reimagined, I think, right now. And there's nothing that says, hey, why don't you just, start up your life again? You have this opportunity to rethink the decisions you make and the life you lead from day one, starting right now. So, I think there's no point in life where it's too late, quote unquote, to do that.
I like that. It's really refreshing. Let's now dive into the knowledge round. Just going to ask you a few more rapid fire questions here, and just kind of gut level, answers that come up to you, just fire them out. So Anna, are you ready for the knowledge round?
Oh, I'm ready.
Have you ever felt like you weren't the strong, grounded man that you're capable of becoming? Like there's something more inside of you, but you don't know how to get it out. Me too. Years ago, I was broke, sleeping on my brother's couch, and just got out of a serious breakup that left me on the floor for months. Now, I have a multiple six-figure business. I'm in the best shape of my life, have an abundant dating life, and live on the beach here in San Diego. I want you to break through too and create the life that you want. And because people kept asking me so many questions, I've created this free video training series on becoming a strong, grounded man so that you can have more freedom, love, and connection in your life. I'll also teach you how to build real backbone to boost your masculinity as a man so that you can have more respect, power, and confidence personally and professionally. Simply go to kfmconfidence.com to get this training. Again, that's kfmconfidence.com. Also, I share the number one conversation that your father never had with you about women. That will be a major wake-up call for 90% of you and will improve the quality of your relationships forever. Go to kfmconfidence.com to get this free training today. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost or kind of unsure of their purpose or kind of lacking a sense of direction in their life right now?
Well, I would tell them to develop a core mantra. And then the other thing that follows that up is creating your life rule book. And I lay out 10 different facets of your life. You can create your own, but basically creating rules for, how you nourish yourself, for the work that you do, for how you play and dream, all of these different areas. And those rules allow you to stay on track with what's important to you, no matter what curveballs are thrown your way. So I think doing the work to get in touch with and name what's important to you and how you want to live your life is a step that many people don't do, but will be the best bet for delivering happiness as life unfolds.
So life rules such as values, setting boundaries, is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So, instead of just saying, I'm going to lose 30 pounds, you might say, I work out because it releases tension and it, makes me smarter and helps me focus at the office. So that versus I'm going to lose 30 pounds, creates this holistic rule where, this is a priority because look at all the different ways that it positively affects my life. So things around self-care, things around the kinds of relationships that you want to invite into your life. It's endless how many you can create. I suggest around 10 of them.
That's great. That's great. And what do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
We're in a culture where I don't think introspection is valued that much. And I think it's particularly not valued and revered for men.
Mm-hmm.
Men are told that they should respond and they should just be ready and be action oriented. And often it takes retreating from the world, doing that active reflection, thinking about how you feel, how you make others feel, what your goals are, all of these things that we tend to associate too often with women. I think men, of course, benefit from immensely. And so I think that is one thing that holds them back. And of course, technology further nudges them into action as opposed to reflection as well.
It's very powerful. And if someone right now is thinking, like that just kind of sounds a little feminine, doesn't really sound masculine, what would you say to that?
I would say look at our greatest leaders over time. Men. I mean, most of them, unfortunately, have been. but you know, I look at someone like the Roosevelts. I mean, they are the whole family. And I opened with a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, but the whole family is just an inspiration, really. And you look at Teddy and FDR, and they, even despite the roles that they were playing, which were arguably the biggest roles in the world as president, they would create the time and the space to go into nature, to actively reflect and read and make sense of their thoughts so that they could return refreshed and better able to lead. And I think that's something that we don't give ourselves the space to do. And therefore we don't give the permission to our leaders as well to do that.
I think that's big. And thanks for sharing that. Now, your book here, Start Up Your Life, just for the audience, go to Amazon, check that out, is a great book. But for yourself, what have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey and why?
Oh, goodness. Well, let's see. There's so many to choose from. I would say in this year I read, so I'll start with a recent one. I read When Breath Becomes Air. Have you read that? And the author actually passed away before it was published, and he knew he was going to die, and he was writing this while he was dying. And I know that sounds incredibly morbid, but it is a rare and insightful journey into the things that we think about when we know our days are limited. And for anyone who's ever grappled with a serious illness or that of someone close to them, I think it really resonates in a very profound way. And I think it can't help but help you reimagine how you want to live your days.
I'm actually, I'm reading that right now, actually. And it is,
wonderful.
I think I'm on like the 50th or 60th page. And yeah, it is not only just the content and the power, but I mean, just the way that the guy writes is really good. I feel like I'm right there beside him as I'm reading the book.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that is just some great storytelling. I love the book, An Intimate History of Humanity by Theodore Zeldin. And what's so wonderful, someone gave me this book in college. It's been out for a long time. And he basically takes a topic, like I think there's a chapter called Why There's Been More Progress in Cooking Than Sex. And he explores it from a literary perspective, from a sort of cultural history and sociological perspective. And then he interviews people. He used France and some French communities as his particular point for his ethnography. And I know I'm making it sound more academic than it is, but the chapters are delightful. I think there's another one called Why Travelers Are Becoming the New Nation. It's incredibly accessible. Every chapter can be read in isolation, and it's just bursting with both concrete data and knowledge as well as really wonderful stories of modern day humanity. So I highly recommend that one. And then on a slightly different, I guess I would bring the David Brooks books. He is a columnist for the New York Times, but his books are completely different. He originally wrote Bobos in Paradise, which is about how we've become this culture that wants everything to be kind of crunchy and slightly imperfect, but we're willing to pay a whole lot of money for it. He wrote another one called On Paradise Drive about the American psyche. And his latest one, The Social Animal, which is the one that I would recommend for most people, really dives into, how do we make these decisions that reorient our lives, be it finding a mate or the professional choices that we make. It's a wonderful, heavily researched, but totally accessible and funny book and collection of writing. So I would really recommend those.
Great books. Yeah, I'm actually throwing the Social Animal on on my wish list as you're talking. I was like, that sounds great. And now this next one's more of a scenario. So, Anna, imagine you had 60 seconds with your 20-year-old self. If you can envision where Anna's at, 20-year-old Anna, personally, professionally, relationships, where she's at, and knowing what you now know today, what would you tell her to do and what would you tell her not to do?
Well, when I was 20, I was in my like wear all black, write poetry kind of angst mode. So I would definitely tell myself to find more outlets for play sooner than later. That was something that I think I gave up on for a while, especially in my early 20s. And then later came back to, and it's something that I preach about quite often. But I think especially in your early 20s, you feel this pressure to take everything seriously and prove yourself all the time.
Right.
And I think that we sometimes forget that it's in play that we're able to reimagine our lives and we're able to discover the things that matter and lead us on the courses that are really right for us. So I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give.
Yeah, I think in our 20s and 30s and when we're younger, we're really trying to grind and achieve more significance while forgetting, what's the point of all this at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I think your 20s are the hardest. I really do. I mean, we have different pressures in our 30s and 40s and beyond, but there is a sort of bell curve where, and I'm sure you've seen this, where it's when you're kind of late teens or so, you're happy, and then it starts to decline, and then it starts to go back up, and it's when you get into like your 60s that you're peaking again. So
wow.
There's a constant,
there's a big gap there.
But it bottoms out between, I think, like 35 to 45. And if you think about that, it has a lot to do with the pressures of families, and a lot of people have more career responsibilities, and there are a lot of very real financial concerns. And so that makes sense. But I think nonetheless, it's in your 20s where it can be really hard to see the world beyond your immediate existence and to reimagine the fact that maybe you don't have it all figured out just yet.
Yeah, because you kind of do. You kind of think you do at that age, and then you're like, oh, maybe I don't actually. Life is pretty hard. Let me learn a few things now. That's great. Yeah, very humbling. So great advice here. And now just kind of for yourself, what's exciting you today? What gets you out of bed in the morning? Big plans for this year?
Well, I mean, obviously my book just recently came out and I've been on my book tour for that. And that's really thrilling and exciting and humbling in a lot of ways. And one of the things that, anytime you release something that you've created, you make yourself vulnerable to criticism. Right. That's part of the creative process. You have to develop a pretty thick skin. Or if you put yourself out in the media, as you do, that not everyone's going to be a fan. But, when you do get responses from people that are heartfelt and where they talk about how, your work or what you've put into the world is actively changing their lives, that may sound cheesy, but it makes it all worthwhile. That is worth everything right there. And so as I get responses from everyday people who have come across, my work or this book, I'm incredibly grateful that I've been given the opportunity to have a platform to share these things, and that people are reaching out and letting me know that it resonates and that it works with them. So that's what's motivating me at the moment, is to continue to have those conversations and touch as many people as possible, and hopefully, evolve that into a follow-up project where I can continue to expand those ideas and that conversation.
All right. This has been a blast having you here on the show. I'm looking forward to any sort of follow-up to this book. And for the audience, Start Up Your Life, Hustle and Hack Your Way to Happiness. Just go to Amazon, pops right up. You could even just put it in Google, it takes you right to Amazon. Also, check out Anna's website at annaakbari.com. That's ANNAAKBARI. I would just put it in Google. It pops right up. I just did it. That's how I found her website.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure having you here on the show. I think my biggest takeaway that really hit a chord and, hit my core was the whole the single biggest indicator of long-term health and happiness is social connection, and you relayed that back to, hey, even smoking a pack of cigarettes, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day to your health if you're lacking in that, even if you are healthy in other aspects of your life. And that really, well, that threw me back, because I spend so much time working. I think so do so many men, and we want to achieve more significance and grow, make a big impact. But at the end of the day, I think we can do it with other people, and I think we can even make a bigger impact and likely a bigger income if we have that social connection. So that really hit my core, and I think if anyone gets something out of this, I think that was just a very powerful lesson. Anna, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story, your lessons here with my community.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.